Situation in the Middle East in Gaza, 609 days since the Hamas atrocities in Israel. IDF intensive operations continue inside the Strip, and there are growing calls from allies to end the offensive. Hardening language too from the UN over what's going inside the territory. A special rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, this week describing it as genocide, saying it is what it is, it's what we have to call it. Israel vehemently denies that. There's a case ongoing brought by South Africa, still being determined by the ICJ. Now, more than 54,000 people have been killed, according to the Hamas-run health authority, including more than 14,000, I should say, children dead and more than 100,000 injured. Israel says Hamas could release hostages at any time to end the conflict, and it's determined, it says, to root out Hamas operatives and infrastructure. It's also been 2 weeks since a controversial Israeli US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's been in operation, the only source of aid now entering, and there's been another incident reported, deaths of 4 people in a crowd outside its hub today. Israel saying its troops were under threat. Let's go to Tel Aviv. Let's speak to Ehud Olmert, the former Israeli Prime Minister, who's recently published an open editorial in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, claiming Israeli actions in Gaza is a war crime. Ehud, welcome to France 24 this evening. First, I want to talk about your article in a moment. The news in the past few days, twofold. One, that emerged in the midst of this conflict, Benjamin Netanyahu admitting that the government is funding and arming a Bedouin group in Gaza to destabilise Hamas, one that's been accused of looting in part of the Strip, described by Western analysts as a criminal gang. Can you see a method in what he's doing there?
Yeah, it looks very bizarre that the Israeli government finances and supports and provides weapons ISIS group, which has been very violent and brutal against us for a long time. However, we are in the middle of a very complex situation. The most important responsibility right now for Israel is to make sure that all the humanitarian needs are provided for over 2 million people living in there. The children and the mothers and everyone, except, of course, the Hamas fighters, which had to be eliminated and which presently, to the extent that they are exposing themselves, they have to be reached out. If this militia of Shabab is helpful in providing the humanitarian services and it is supervised in an appropriate manner by the Israeli authorities and by the Americans, by the Egyptians, all those that are involved, and it helps provide these humanitarian needs, so bizarre as it may look. Okay, let's face it, better this than not having the humanitarian needs provided.
And what about the Gaza Humanitarian Fund? What do you make of the fact that we've seen, in 2 weeks, this constant chaos, suspension, dozens of deaths, Israel saying it's been threatened, and again it comes to the central problem, I think you'll understand as well, Ehud, lack of verification because international journalists are not allowed into the Gaza Strip, ostensibly because they would be killed, says Israel's government spokesperson, by Hamas.
Failure to allow the international media to get into Gaza and to be able to observe and report of what they see in reality is a great failure and is a weakness. And of course, it raises all these doubts about the authenticity and the credibility of the reports coming from Israel with regard to the actual events there. Look, there is no question that at the beginning, Israel denied as a matter of policy the supply of humanitarian needs. I mean, the statements made by ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and their supporters threatening the prime minister that if humanitarian needs were provided, they will break down the cabinet and there will be a coalition crisis. So this was obvious and outright, and no one could deny it. Afterwards, as a result of perhaps American pressures and others, Israel changed its attitude, and now these humanitarian needs are provided. It's regrettable that it had to wait for such a long time and that there were so many victims as part of the opposition to this, and that and the need and the desire of the people there to get food.
It's also hard to know, isn't it? Because there are also two-track narratives on what's going on inside there. If you listen to Hamas-run health authority, this is a targeting of people in crowd. There are innocent people being killed. Hospital staff nearby at Rafah saying that they're treating an increase of injuries, people wanting food. And Israel saying that this is Hamas manipulating the situation, deliberately instigating problems there.
Well, let's face it, Hamas is not the most reliable and credible source to rely upon. Okay, it is not unlikely that the Hamas is also exaggerating and blowing out of any proportion certain things in order to win a case that they are trying to wage against the Israeli government. So I'd be very careful not to pass any judgment about the specifics, which I'm not familiar with. One thing I know, it is incumbent upon us to make every possible effort to provide the humanitarian needs at the lowest cost possible to human lives and to non-involved people anywhere in Gaza. That's what we need to do, and I hope that we'll make these efforts, whether with the assistance of this militia or not, whether with the assistance of any international fund, whichever way that will bring the people in Gaza the humanitarian needs without costing human lives, I will support.
Now, you've been a long-time political rival of Benjamin Netanyahu. Notably, though, you supported the war at the beginning, like many allies did as well, but your position has changed, and you've had to think hard, I imagine, before writing this piece, categorising Israeli actions as war crimes, something that's still to be judged, evidence still being weighed up in a court of law, and in a separate cases at the ICJ and ICC. What specifically are the war crimes as you see it?
Okay. I supported the war, and I supported all the efforts which were made, and I think everyone knew. And when President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak and President Macron and Prime Minister Meloni and Chancellor Scholz at the time and so many others supported the right of Israel to reach out for the Hamas people, it was obvious to everyone that there will be a collateral damage, because the Hamas were embedded inside the most densely populated area with hundreds of thousands of people living together with them in above ground, underground, in the tunnels, in the bunkers, everywhere. So in as long as there will be, there was an international consensus about the right of Israel to act and the knowledge that the action will take place in those places where there may be a collateral damage, it was one stage. Now, after 20 months, after we have done everything that a military operation can do in order to eradicate the Hamas, and Hamas has been largely eradicated as a fighting force, and that so many thousands of people were killed, many of them are not involved, there is a question. What is the merit? What is the political strategy? What is the military achievement that deserves or that justifies the continued and expansion military operation?
Well, you get to the heart of it.
Most of the Israelis think that there is no reason to continue. And they say that the only reason for it is the political considerations of the prime minister. When there is a military operation which no one trusts is aimed to achieve any important national goal, when Israeli soldiers are killed, the hostages can be lost, and many innocent, non-involved Palestinians are killed, altogether in that context, this is a crime, and that's what I say.
You raised a number of interesting points there. First of all, I want to talk about in a moment the point about the polls. There's certainly declining number of reservists and the problem to recruitment as well. I want to also just go back to a point about the war crimes issue. A protection against war crimes allegations, Israel says, and is the case, is the principle of proportionality, additional protocol 1 of the international humanitarian law. It judges military necessity balanced against the loss of civilian life or objects that cannot be seen, as you know this, Ehud, as a key quote, as excessive. So at which point did this conflict stop being proportional to military aims?
I think that in every war, in every military effort, there is a collateral damage and non-involved people are killed, mostly in the context of fighting a terrorist organization, which is embedded inside, as I say, the densely populated area. So what makes the difference and what really is significant is what is the attacker, in this case Israel, sets out to achieve, which can justify the possible collateral damage that is caused by this military operation. And when there is a consensus, I think unprecedented, that it is done primarily, almost exclusively, to achieve political needs of the personal needs of the prime minister, this is a crime. This is a violation of the basic fundamental values that the state of Israel represented for generations. And this is not something that can be tolerated or accepted or forgiven. We are against it.
We're seeing a shift, aren't we? Notably, Ehud, in the language in recent weeks for several allies, the French, the Canadians, the British, as you mentioned a moment ago. The UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, saying, I'm calling it what it is. This is genocide. But you're not calling it genocide, are you? You're saying war crimes, but not genocide.
Look, this is not a genocide, and I don't think, and I have to be very careful about it. First of all, I definitely don't accuse the Israeli army. I accuse the Israeli government. But even the Israeli government, which I'm not a supporter of, and you have mentioned it, and I think it's well known everywhere, not just in Israel, but everywhere I speak to. The Israeli government never gave any order to anyone in the fighting units, in the high command of the army, to shoot indiscriminately. In other words, to achieve what may be analyzed by professional legal terms as genocide or even a war crime. It is the policy of negligence, of indifference to the possible ramifications of what is done for something which is widely unaccepted, not just outside of Israel, but within the state of Israel, by the Israeli people, and probably it appears more and more by even the fighting units. This is a crime. Now, what is precisely the legal definition of war crime or genocide that can or cannot be applied to this? I don't know. I'm talking about the general perception, about the appearance, about what it looks like, and what it means, and what it achieves. And I think it's quite obvious.
The onus here, as you see it then, is clear as day. In your view, President Trump has to call this. He needs to say immediately, enough is enough, and the offensive would stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, this moment, the balance should stop, the war should stop. We should bring back all the hostages. We'll have to probably release Palestinian prisoners as part of an agreement. There should be an interim security force made in cooperation with the Palestinian Authority and with Jordan and Egypt and moderate Arab countries, possibly also the Emirates, Bahrain, Saudis, all of them welcome, to take over the actual control of Gaza so that Israel will pull out completely and that the Hamas will not have the opportunity to rise again into any position of dominance. This is what we need to do. End the war, release the hostages, bring back security forces of our moderate Arab countries that is prepared to oppose and to clear Gaza of any continued Hamas presence, and starting to rebuild Gaza with an administration that will be appointed by the Palestinian Authority, but will have the executive powers to exercise the necessary needs of Gaza in the future.
I spoke, Ehud, with the former UN humanitarian chief, Martin Griffiths, on Friday. He spent 5 decades in humanitarian mediation work as well. And he said it's been a life appealing to the better angels in people. Is that possible in this conflict?
I hope so. I definitely hope so. I'm not certain I can give you any, clear-cut opinion whether it can be. But I definitely hope so.
I mean, I guess one thing you've pointed to, and it seems we're in a kind of intractable prism right now, is, as you see it, and many Diplomats in the West that I've spoken to would suggest, and this is denied, of course, by the Israeli Prime Minister, is that he's between personally a rock and a hard place. This is existential for him, that as soon as this war ends, he's facing court cases of corruption to which he denies, but his world would suddenly very soon change, wouldn't it?
Look, as I said before, there is a wide understanding and almost a consensus in Israel. More than 60% of the Israelis say they don't trust that the motivation of the Prime Minister has anything to do with the real national interest of the state of Israel. They say that this is primarily a matter of personal need because of the circumstances that you have described, that what may happen if the war will end up and he will have to face, without the excuse of continuing the fighting, all the political problems and personal problems and legal problems that he is facing. And I think that we are very close to call for early elections in Israel. Soon enough, I hope.
There'll be a lot of people. Yeah, I hear you. There are a lot of people here on the right-wing supporters of the government and right-wing politicians who will say, and you'll know this argument, Ehud Olmert, he's been convicted of bribery, corruption. He spent time in prison, therefore has no political currency. But am I right to say there's been a lot of people also urging you to use your voice at the same time to give, well, given your profile and political clout, to speak about this?
Listen, I'm not going to start now the debate which I have over here in the international media. I can say only this, that all of my record as Prime Minister has never been questioned, has never been inquired, has never been indicted, has never been convicted. There was never any complaint about the way that I handled the government. And all the allegations against me were dating back to 20 years, 25 years, into different periods and different circumstances. I don't want to go into this. Question is, do I represent just myself? Am I fighting a personal war with Netanyahu because of whatever? Or do I represent a large part of the Israeli population that is anxious to hear me, that supports me, that reacts to me, that sends me messages, that reach out for me and ask me to speak up, and so on and so forth? I think that it is widely accepted, even by the international media. That's why they interview me, that I represent a large part of the public opinion of Israel. And I think that this is very important, that the international community will know that there are other voices that speak up from Israel, not the Ben-Gvirs, not the Smotriches, not the messianic right-wing extremist fundamentalist groups, but people with compassion, with restraint, with understanding, that are prepared to move forward towards peace rather than towards revenge and killing and bloodshed. That's what I represent, and I believe that this voice needs to be heard.
And with it being heard, one thing that strikes me, you've touched upon how polarised society is, protests on the streets, the scale of non-compliance as well, significant numbers of reservists not showing up for duty. You've said we are rapidly reaching a position where the government cannot carry on, that they will have to call elections. Tell me what you mean.
That's right. And we are in the middle of a political crisis. On, I think, Wednesday, there will be a vote in Parliament to call for early elections with a likelihood that there will be a majority for it. So there will be probably an agreed date for early elections sometimes at the beginning of 26. That's my reading, but you know, I'm not a political commentator. All these young guys that are running around know much more than I am. I just have this understanding that we are very close to early elections.
Yes, well, there aren't many Israeli prime ministers to the pound, so it's, you know, your view will always be valid. A brief word on your time as Prime Minister as well, because you revealed for the first time just a few weeks ago that this hand-drawn peace map back in 2008, that when you were Prime Minister, you proposed to Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas for a two-state solution that created, I think, a Palestinian state in around 94% of the occupied West Bank. And it didn't happen.
95.6%.
95.6%, even more. But it didn't happen, is this right? Because you wouldn't hand over the copy of the map to Abbas, and therefore he wanted experts to see it. Tell me how different things could have been. Is that the case?
You guys have a good sense of humor. I presented Abu Mazen with a map the same map that you saw in one of the broadcasts when I was asked about it, so I presented it. Had you asked me, I would have presented it to you now to show you that a real professional map with everything, all the territories concerned, represented. And there is no question about it, and no one denies it. Abu Mazen didn't have the courage, didn't have the wisdom, didn't have the leadership at that time to say yes. He never said no, I have to give him credit, but he never said yes. And many Palestinians that are familiar with the facts know that it was presented. The Prime Minister of Israel in the year 2008 presented the President of the Palestinian Authority in the context of official, formal, serious process of negotiations, if you want, that is known as the Annapolis process, that was accompanied and supported and encouraged by President Bush and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. We presented a comprehensive peace plan on the basis of 67 borders to the Palestinian Authority. We offered them that the Arab side of Jerusalem will be the capital of the Palestinian state. We also agreed that the whole city of Jerusalem will not be at the exclusive sovereignty of either Israel or Palestine, but will be administered by a trust of 5 nations, of which Israel and Palestine will be part, that we will deal with the issue of the refugees within the context of the Arab League Peace Initiative. Everything that the Palestinians were claiming and demanding and fighting for all these years was presented to them. And the Prime Minister, the President of the Palestinian Authority, as I said before, didn't have the guts, didn't have the courage, didn't have the wisdom, didn't have the leadership to say, okay, I sign, which may have changed the lives of millions. It may have changed the stability of the region. It may have changed the world. I don't think that I exaggerate. And they failed.
But he said no. Is it right, just to check with you now, is it right that it's because he wanted to take away a copy of this map and show his so-called experts around him, and you said no, this is a now or never deal?
No. I said to him, listen, if you want to take the map with you, you have to sign it. Because I knew on the basis of past experiences that he will take the map and he will never come back. And after 2-3 years on this next round of negotiations, the Palestinians will come with this map and say, that we already got from Olmert. Now, what else do you give us? I said, no. And we agreed that his expert and my expert will meet the following day in Jerusalem in order to examine all the technical aspects of this proposal. So, look.
Yeah.
They just didn't have the leadership and the courage and the wisdom and the inspiration to say yes and to go ahead and to change history. And I told him, listen, if you will not do it, it will take years and years and years, maybe 50 years before another Israeli prime minister will come to you with these ideas.
Yeah, it offers a very different perspective of what could have been. Ehud, a final thought. Last time you and I spoke was just around about the 1-year anniversary. Are we getting to a point where you think, given what you've just told me about potential for elections, pressure continually increasing, that we'll be having this same conversation in the midst of a conflict at the next anniversary? Or do you have more hope than that might be peace by then?
Look, I'm an optimist. All my life I was. I'm not a young guy. I've been around in the center of Israeli politics, national center of Israeli politics, for more than 50 years. And I tell you something, what I said, what I proposed to the Palestinians in 2008, which I now campaign for with my colleague from the Palestinian side, Dr. Nasser al-Qudwa, who was the foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority, the ambassador to the United Nations of the Palestinian Authority, and the nephew of the founding father of the Palestinian National Movement, Arafat. He is my partner, and we are proposing the same peace plan that I proposed in 2008. We are working jointly, silently, and we are moving around everywhere to convince the international community, including the president of your country, and he met with us. And we are going to participate in the conference this weekend in Paris, supporting the two-state solution. I'll tell you something. One day, sooner than most people think, it will be accomplished, it will be implemented, it will be achieved, and nothing can stop it. History is on our side. We just have to fight and never to stop.
Ehud, great to talk to you. Pleasure to speak to you tonight on France 24. Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.